Hello, welcome back to Called to Homeschool, episode number 306, looking at all sides of history and April lesson plans. Hey, friend, how are you doing? I just want to start with saying how grateful I am for you, um, not only for listening, which honestly, so grateful for, but also thank you for applying the principles I teach. That is my absolute favorite things. When you first start with some of these things, a podcast or a membership or something like that, the numbers are really exciting, right? Like, oh, this many listeners, this many downloads, this many whatever. And the longer I do this, the more I actually care about seeing what I teach being implemented and seeing families get along better and like each other. And like, Meg, I didn't know that this could be so good. And so the numbers I don't really care about anymore as much, right? But like I love seeing people apply the principles that I teach. So thank you so much for listening and doing the work and creating more amazing families in the world because we all know we need some. So thank you so much for that. Well, today I want to talk about history and go over April lesson plans for April. So, one of my favorite things in homeschool is history. I love it, which is surprising because school had actually killed my love for history. I don't know anything, like, I don't remember anything from my whole public school education journey about history. It's so funny. I was not an honor student. I couldn't have cared less about school. But it's funny because I know I passed all these classes, so I don't even know how I did it. Memorized the test, then I could forget about it. But I always thought I hated history. Like it's so boring, it's so stupid. And when I started homeschooling my own kids, I was like, I don't know about history. But as soon as I found good books to read, or Charlotte Mason puts it, living books about history, I absolutely fell in love with history. And it is my favorite genre to read. Historical fiction is actually my favorite, which my daughter teases me. Like, just read the nonfiction book, but I love the story element in there. I read plenty of both, but like that is my favorite type of book to read. So I have studied so many different parts of history, studied places that I want to go, places I am going or have been to, just things I want to know, and just I love getting to know the people, the culture, all these amazing things. So it's just one of my favorite things to study. But history is interesting because there's always more than one side, excuse me, to every side of a story. Even in your own home, think about this. Let's say you and your husband have a disagreement, or in history, we'd call it a war, right? So let's say you and your husband have a disagreement and you tell all your friends, can you believe that my husband went golfing on our anniversary or XYZ, whatever he did, right? Please insert whatever your story is. So, of course, I had to give him the silent treatment, and I was so mean and mad, and I yelled at him, and we got into this humongous fight. Like, oh, isn't he such a jerk for doing that? So, if I were writing history, my story would be my husband is a big jerk. He did this thing. So, I was justified in my actions of yelling at him, getting mad at him, giving him the silent treatment, whatever it was. Well, that's just one side of the story, right? Because my husband would have a different side of the story. Maybe he would say, well, actually, yes, I did do that. But before I did that, I asked my wife if she wanted to do something for our anniversary. And she said, I just don't care. So when my buddies asked me if I wanted to go golfing and it was on that day, I was like, sure, because my wife said she didn't care if we went and did anything. So now I'm confused why she's mad at me and giving me the silent treatment because I asked her in the first place whether or not we should go, right? So history is the same side, but usually the story is written from the narrative of the victor, right? So take the American Revolution. It is written from the point of view of Americans winning this war, right? It is like, oh man, the British were taxing us like crazy, and they were, I mean, taxation without representation, and King George was doing all this, and blah, 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 blah. And so then we threw all the tea into the harbor, and whatever, all the things the American did, right? I could get into all of that because we wrote that side because we won. And people are like, yes, the American Revolution. And I love the founding fathers. And it's so amazing that we stuck up um, for ourselves and the taxation that England was doing, right? And saying, like, this is not fair. But it would be so fascinating had we lost, right? Or even the Britain's point of view of the war with us winning, right? What if, from their point of view, like we helped settle this new nation? We financed ships to come over here. We helped protect them. We provided a military, and they were so ungrateful. They were just monsters to us, and they dumped our tea into the harbor, and they were terrible to the soldiers. And you know what I mean? But like from this different point of view, if you read it both sides, it's just fascinating. So if it's just fascinating how war is, in different parts of history. We usually read the one side. Well, the last month, we started a three-part series of studying the Civil War. Last month was an overview of some of the major battles, right? And usually battles are told, I mean, you could say like, yay, this side won, but usually they're told pretty descriptively as far as this side did this side did that, right? This is where the location took, and you can kind of be a little bit more unbiased with that. But the person in the Civil War that I think is a very interesting person is Abraham Lincoln. And history paints him out to be a saint. And if you don't like Abraham Lincoln, they say you're racist. They say if you were from the South, you were automatically a terrible person. You probably owned a slave, or you hated Black people, or whatever it is. Like, it's pretty intense with Abraham Lincoln. But have you ever read or considered the other side? Have you ever read the Civil War from the South's point of view, or from people who didn't like Abraham Lincoln? And I find it absolutely fascinating, just as somebody who loves history, to get more than one side, because there usually is a lot more going on than what we are told from one point of view. So I believe when you study both sides of history that you start to get a much better complete picture. So I just want to highlight some things with Lincoln. And so this is why some people love him. So a lot of people admire Abraham Lincoln. They will say he's one of the best presidents we ever had. He's one of their favorites, right? And here is some of the reasons why they love him. So, preserving the Union, leading the U.S. through the Civil War, and kept the nation from splitting. The Emancipation Proclamation took a stand against slavery, paving the way for its abolition. A strong moral compass, stood for justice, equality, and the rights of all people. The Gettysburg Address, one of the most powerful speeches in America. Memorable quotes. Let's see, packed with sayings like, government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. Humble beginnings. People love that about him, right? Grew up poor, taught himself law, and worked hard to rise to the presidency. He was resilient, overcame many personal and political setbacks without giving up. You have probably heard Honest Abe, right? Earned a reputation for integrity and fairness. Sense of humor, known for telling stories and jokes even through tough times. A compassionate leader, showed kindness and understanding even toward his enemies. So this is the stuff that I was taught in school, if I remembered. But like that's what you're learning about Abe. And like, if you don't like him, like people automatically put you in this category of where you're a racist. And it's so interesting because I have done bigger deep dives of the Civil War, read both sides. Last month, the book was in our history suggestion for teens, was the politically incorrect guide to the Civil War. So fascinating to see both sides and to really understand it. And so I wanted to just share the opposing side of Abraham Lincoln, of why some people don't like him. And I think this is so great because it teaches, not only, I mean, it just opens your eyes to like, oh my goodness, maybe there's more to these stories than I need to, like, than what I've just been told, and I need to dive in deeper and do more research. But it also helps your children with their critical thinking skills. Like, let me show you, these are what some people say, this is what other people say. And as you are really wanting to help your teen be great at critical thinking, then they have to be open to other people's points of view. And like, hey, this is why some people like this is why some people don't like this. Now you get to form your own opinion, right? So it's a really great way, as you are studying history and looking at both sides, to really help your kids to decide, what do I think, what do I like. And so I wanted to share some of the common critiques and of the opposing point of view from Abraham Lincoln. So let's see. Some argue he was not a radical abolitionist and initially prioritized preserving the Union over immediate emancipation. So that's a lot of the things I've studied with him too, is that the Civil War, like slavery was a part of it, obviously, but it started with really trying to preserve the Union. And it wasn't immediately like, let's get rid of slavery, but really about preserving this union and keeping that together. Let's see. He once supported the idea of relocating freed Black Americans to Africa or Central America, which some see as problematic. And there are actually some pretty terrible quotes. I don't know what that's the right word, but condemning quotes from him of his thoughts about Black people. And he thought they were inferior, right? And so, kind of interesting when you start reading this other side. So that's just kind of his views on race and slavery, but he also expanded the federal power. So he suspended habeas corpus. During the Civil War, Lincoln suspended certain civil liberties, allowing the government to imprison people without trial. Critics argue this was an overreach of executive power. He also increased federal government control. Some believe he set a precedent for a stronger central government at the expense of states' rights. Let's see. A lot of people also talk about his Civil War decisions, that his leadership in the Civil War led to massive loss of life. And some argue he could have pursued peace earlier. So if you look at the stats of Civil War, how many Americans died? The numbers anywhere from 650,000, 850,000, with most of the people dying from disease, right? But obviously, a lot of them dying in the battles. And it was just such a gruesome war with how many people died that I'm so against war that I think there's always a way to figure something out without fighting over it. Let's see. The handling of the South, a lot of some Southerners viewed him as a tyrant who destroyed their way of life. And it's interesting when obviously, I'm against slavery, right? But it's interesting when you start studying this of how many people at this time period were still owning slaves. The number was dwindling. It was getting lower and lower. And people, I believe that it would have naturally just stopped and faded out. And because, I mean, unfortunately, slavery has been a way of life all over the world, right? How did they build Egypt? And Greek had slaves, and the Romans had slaves, and the Irish were enslaved, right? So, like, slavery, unfortunately, has been a worldwide problem for a very long time, and it naturally just dissolved. People realizing there's better ways to do things, or maybe we shouldn't treat people this way. So, I think over time that the South would have slowly stopped slavery, and then it wouldn't have been as such a big divide between white people and Black people. And I think there would be less problems. So let's see. So that's handling the South. So other comments about him are economic policies, the first income tax. Lincoln introduced the first federal income tax to fund the war, which some argue was an overstep. And then the national banking system, while it helped stabilize the economy, critics saw it as an increasing federal control over finance. And a lot of times we will even learn in history that the Emancipation Proclamation ended slavery, but it didn't. It was the 13th Amendment that abolished slavery nationwide. So it's just really interesting that all you have to do is start reading and read both sides of history and just open up and try to decide, like, what do I think, who do I agree with, and looking at, does somebody get any gain by promoting a certain way of thought, right? And maybe somebody's promoting, like, well, we needed the income tax, or we want to promote all these types of things, but it's so interesting when you look at, do they gain something from that? Why would people be against that? And so I just think it opens up so many thoughts and critical thinking for your kids of just seeing both sides of history. And so I'm really excited to offer some books that show you both sides. So like I said, one was last month, and in this month we have like the little kid books. They're all cute, just little picture books, right? About some of the key players like Lincoln and some of the generals. But for the teen books, there is a book that is super pro Lincoln, and then another one that doesn't like Lincoln. So you can kind of read, like, what do I think, and form your own opinion so that your kids aren't just taking in this information and then regurgitating what you want to hear, but actually taking in a lot of information and then forming their own opinions, which is why a lot of us homeschooled, right? Is so that our kids could be free thinkers and do all these things. And so sometimes that means maybe exposing them to different parts of history and different sides of the story. So I think it's so interesting to discuss how history can be so different depending on whose point of view you look at, which is so great because this month is our social skill is, sorry, our, what is that called? Our skills or life skills is social. And part of that is relationships and thinking about, even if you took that aspect of looking at both sides of the story to understand a war, a battle, why people were doing certain things, then you could actually take that in about relationships. Why did your sister do this or your brother do that? And trying to understand it from their point of view. Oh, interesting. They ripped your favorite thing because you kicked them earlier. Oh, interesting, right? It wasn't that they were just a tyrant or an evil person. So I think it's so fascinating to really do look at both of these sides. Um, let's see. So let me find where I was. Okay. Let's see. Like I said, so for life skills, we're doing social skills, which also include helping sibling relationships and getting along. So, a lot of great picture books, really great activities. Science, we're studying gardening, which is so beautiful. It's going to be April. Hopefully, you're getting some sunshine where you are. We get some, then it snows again, right? But starting to get closer and closer to spring. So, super excited about that. So gardening and the arts that go along with gardening, and poetry that goes along with gardening, and artists that goes along with gardening. That's really beautiful. But I wanted to show you some of the activities. So my friend and fellow coach, she's in my membership. She helps coach there, and then she has been helping me with all the activities. And she does an amazing job. And I was looking over some of them, and I thought, I love these. Like, she is so good at it. And so I wanted to share what some of the activities. So every day the lesson plans have a book you read, a cute little picture book, and then an activity to go with it. And these activities, I mean, she is just fine tuning this, and it's so awesome. And she also made social skills that you can practice on for throughout the month, right? So you can do this as a family of like, okay, what are some skills we want to work on? And we can add it to last month when we were working on physical skills, right? So like, hey, let's keep that going. Let's just add, and just adding a little bit at a time, so your kids just keep getting more and more and better life skills and habits to bless their lives and help your family to function really well. So I wanted to share one of the activities she had written. Uh, so it is called a Kindness Bucket Family Challenge. And who doesn't want their family to be more kind to each other and speaking kindly and acting more kindly to each other? So the objective is to teach your kids to show how kind words and acts fill emotional buckets, and how unkindness dips from them. So you'll need a jar, cotton balls, or pom poms. And then you'll read the book suggestion for that goes along with the story. And then you'll make your own family kindness bucket. Throughout the week, you'll add a pom pom every time someone says or does something kind. And throughout the week, you will take one out every time someone says or does something unkind. At the end of the week, or you could even do at the end of every night, right? You're putting the kids to bed, like, let's check our bucket, or at dinner time, like, let's check our bucket. How did we do today? And you can discuss how full the bucket is and how it felt to give kindness, how full the bucket is. Wouldn't it be interesting if you did a small bucket so it could be overflowing? So you could talk about that when you are being so kind and other people are being kind to you, then it's easy to give kindness to other people. So, like, if we're all giving kindness to each other, we're all so full and so happy and sharing with everybody. But if everybody's empty because we're only saying mean words, how much that takes away. And we all just kind of feel that hard, empty, cold, and alone, right? So, how amazing to review that at the night, at the end of the week, throughout the month, of just like, hey, how are we doing? Like, we did amazing today. And maybe you can even add in something kind of fun with it, right? Of like, every time we fill it up, we get to have a special treat that night. We get to have a game night. We get to do something fun as a family because we are really working hard on how we speak and how we act to each other. So, that's just one of the fun activities. So many amazing activities throughout the month. I'm excited to do them with my kids. You can head over to www.coachmegthomas.com, or from my Instagram, which is also Coach Meg Thomas, and just there in my bio. So I just love you all. Thank you so much for being here, and love to know your thoughts about history and seeing both sides. So make sure to come on over to Instagram and share your thoughts with me. See you, friends. Have a good one.